Hey guys, welcome back to Outdoor Tactics. My name is Robert. You probably clicked on this video because you're wondering which release you should be using for archery hunting. You've got index style releases like so, and you have handheld thumb button releases like so. Both of them have their own unique pros and cons, reasons why you may or may not want to go with them. So in this video we're going to lay some of those out for you and help you make the best decision possible for you. So first things first, if you are watching this video anywhere near your deer season or whatever hunting season you're waiting for, and you already have a system that works, a word of caution, switching from a handheld to an index or an index to a handheld is going to change a lot of things about how your bow shoots and how you can physically set up your anchor points, your draw length, things like that. Maybe even the height of your peep sight would have to change when you change releases. So this is something that I would recommend doing in the off season only, when you have time to reacclimate to your bow setup as a system that includes your release. So don't be going, 2-3 weeks before deer season and then saying, I watched a video that told me that this release is better than this one, or vice versa, and then rerouting your entire mental pathway of shooting your bow and doing yourself a disservice in the field. So just a little word to the wise there. This is not something to be done mid-season. This is an off-season activity. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on and get right into it. Okay, so just for demo purposes, I've gone ahead and thrown on my index release. This is a Scott Wildcat 2. This is the index release that I've been using for years. Started my archery journey here and I have really enjoyed using it. It's adjustable in a bunch of different places, but we'll get into that later. The main difference between this and a thumb button release, a handheld release like this, is that this is pretty much required to stay on a wrist strap the entire time you're using it, whereas this you can throw in your pocket. So one of the big pros of an index style release is that they generally come in cheaper than their handheld counterparts. I'm not sure if this is because it's a cheaper design to manufacture, a more simple machine, but they generally come in at sometimes even as much as half the cost of a high-end handheld release for a high-end index release like the one I'm wearing here. These Scott Wildcats generally come in for about $90, but I actually found them on sale for $45 or $50. So if you sail hunt around a little bit, you can find some great deals on some really high-quality index releases. If you happen to be a newer archer, but you've got a little bit of experience handling firearms, say in rifle or shotgun hunting, this is going to feel pretty familiar to you. It is just a trigger that you pull with your standard trigger finger. It's very similar to what you would use for a rifle, so that's a huge plus for people that are just trying to try out archery for the first time. You might have some carryover experience from other shooting sports. Index style releases are also quite a bit more forgiving than a handheld release. Generally, if your form isn't exactly perfect throughout multiple shots, you aren't going to see your groups open up as much with an index style release. But of course, with less consistency does come larger group sizes, so it's not going to do a ton of favors on just fixing poor form, but it might let you get away with just a little bit more in that they are very forgiving in their design. Although these releases are constantly attached to your wrist, you might think that they may end up getting in the way, and in some cases they can, but a lot of design features have been put into it to try to mitigate that problem, and they can fold back out of the way here, so you can have hands-free use if you need to get something out of your pack, remove your quiver off your bow, grab arrows, knock an arrow, something like that in the woods. You're not going to have this in the middle of your palm where all your work is happening, so that's a great benefit as well. So overall, super simple, very forgiving. They can be adjusted for the trigger travel and trigger weight, this model specifically. They can also be adjusted to fit multiple shooters by having this main tube here. You can slide this up or down to make it reach the correct spot in your hand. So as far as adjustability goes, they've got that in the bag as well. There are some qualities of index releases that I personally do not love, and they sort of begin to show a negative light on these in my recent years of hunting. One is these straps that they come with, generally speaking, will wear, and they'll loosen up over time, which is nice because they don't bite into your wrist as bad, but it changes the distance from your hand that this release ends up sitting at. So with this one, it's a fairly stiff wrist strap, so it hasn't lost its shape yet, but eventually it will. And that release is going to start to creep forward in my hand and make me have to use my fingertip to pull it, which is going to lead to some inconsistencies. You can always just go up one more slot in the strap itself, but it's just something to think about. Also, if you're out shooting in hot weather and you begin to sweat, this release will slip further up your wrist. If it's raining, any type of moisture for whatever reason gets into your system, these are a point of inconsistency, the straps themselves. So Is it really a big deal? I can't say that it's a deal breaker for me, but it is just something to keep in mind. Also to consider is the fact that, as I said earlier, these do fold down out of the way, but you still have a metallic beam on your wrist, which is generally what's moving around the most when you're up in a tree stand or if you're hunting off of the ground. You're at a higher likelihood to ding this off of other metallic objects and make really loud noise in the stand, which is not great for me. For my uses, I prefer to have something I could store in my pocket. But again, you just have to be careful. Now, one of the biggest issues with index releases, especially with newer shooters, is you tend to develop target panic with releases like this. Obviously, target panic is a shooter-dependent thing. If you are a great archer and you put on an index-style release, you're still going to be a great archer. If you have issues in your form or you're developing target panic, I don't care what release you use. I don't care how light the trigger is or anything like that. You're still going to be punching shots. You're still going to be inconsistent. So the old adage of it's the Indian, not the arrow, definitely comes into play. However, I have noted between friends of mine, people that I've seen shoot, and just the general understanding of how these work, you are more likely to develop target panic with these because there's not a great way to shoot them with a surprise release other than just slowly squeezing this trigger, which people are eventually going to get in their mind. They're going to understand when that trigger is about to go off, and they're going to change the way that they shoot to sort of accommodate for what they already know is going to happen. Now, that punching that can happen with index style releases is also a bit more negative because if you can think of the string coming off the top of this perfectly straight, the actual force of pressing the trigger is off axis, right? If you're pulling with it in your with your finger, if you do pull this trigger straight back as you are supposed to, you probably don't have target panic issues, but if you do end up punching that trigger, you will end up imparting some off-axis force to the release itself, which is going to move the D-loop away from your face in the moment of firing. That's going to lead to inconsistency as well. So just a few cons to take into account for the index release. I don't think these cons in any way, shape, or form disqualify it from being a great hunting release. They're just a few things to keep in mind. So let's move into the world of handheld releases. These are a bit different in the way that they operate than something like an index style release. Obviously, they're a completely different design. Instead of it wrapping around your wrist with a strap and using your index finger to pull a trigger, this just is held in your hand. There is no strap unless you add a lanyard, which I do generally recommend. We'll talk about why you might need a lanyard later. But you are then going to come back to anchor up on your face and use your thumb to actuate the trigger. So one of the main features that I love about a handheld release for a hunting scenario is actually that there is no wrist strap. I personally am not a huge fan of wrist straps. I'm not a huge fan of having a release in my way while I'm trying to do other tasks. This you can just slip into a pocket or wear on a lanyard and kind of tuck it down into your wrist like so, and then it's actually out of your way. It's not banging on things. You can shove it into your jacket pocket while you sit and wait. So just for the record, this is the Spot Hogg Whippersnapper thumb button release. I absolutely love this thing. This is my current hunting release, just as a bit of a spoiler alert for the end of the video. But I have a full review of this release live on the channel already. I will leave it up in the cards right now, so feel free to go check that out. So in hunting scenarios, there are some reasons that I might prefer to go with a handheld over an index. They are overall more versatile. You can shoot them in more ways than the index style release. The index style release is just going to be from squeezing that trigger finger. They're pretty difficult to shoot in back tension, although some shooters can do it. These releases, on the other hand, can be shot by commanding it with your thumb, commanding it with your entire hand, shooting it similar to a hinge in that you are rotating your pinky and these three fingers backwards to actually push this button into my thumb, like so, and that eventually breaks. Or you can shoot it like a back tension, where you push and pull the bow, push with your bow hand and pull with your release hand until that release breaks, just by wrapping your thumb around the knurled knob on the back there. Another pro that I see people not talking about all that much is that you actually gain some free draw length when you switch to a handheld release. As you can see, when my hand is wrapped around this like so, that D-loop is right at my fingertips, right? I'm closer to the D-loop with this handheld than I would be if this was on my wrist like so, and I'm that far away from the D-loop with my wrist. Versus here, I'm much closer. So what this ends up giving you is maybe a ½ inch of extra draw length, but it's completely free. You're switching to a shorter, more compact system in your hand, which is going to gain you free velocity by increasing your draw length. So overall, they're just machined more precisely. They're one solid unit, so there are no moving parts in that there is a hinge in an index style release that can introduce some inconsistency. They're also going to be more crisp on the trigger break and more adjustable for shooters. Also, since they can permanently affix themselves to a D-loop on your bowstring, you can actually just clip them onto your bow and let them hang there as you're hunting. You don't have to worry about keeping track of it, not bumping it on things until the deer steps out and you have to make your shot. You grab your bow, you grab your release, and you're ready to start your draw cycle there. So there's a lot of benefits to go on with this for hunting scenarios. Let's move into the cons, because there definitely are some that people need to be aware of. So generally speaking, these releases are going to come in more expensive than your standard index release. This one is about $100 to $115, which is almost, well, it's more than double what I paid for that Wildcat 2 release. Just kind of the nature of the industry, these are more intense on like their machining processes, and they're going to run you more money because of that. Now, there are some index releases that go up into like the 150, 160 mark. There's a lot of thumb button releases that go into the 250 to 300, 350 mark, where it's getting a little bit rich for my blood personally. That's why I like going for releases such as this. So there is a balance point between price and performance. I think that this one strikes that balance very well. But just know that getting into a thumb button release is going to run you a little bit more money than something from the index family. Another con is going to be the learning curve. These are definitely not as intuitive to use as an index release. It's a little bit weird squeezing your thumb or squeezing your whole hand in this shape, in this sort of an anchor, when you first start teaching yourself how to do it. Once you get it down, it's not hard at all, but just the learning curve from going from something like an index to a handheld, it can throw some people for a loop. I know for me, I was a little bit uncomfortable with it when I first started. You'll also see videos of people coming to draw their bow back and letting go of that release early and sending an arrow over the barn or whatever. And yeah, a little bit of a learning curve. They work a little bit differently, obviously, so something to be aware of and something to just train through. Now, one thing that you do have to be aware of going into handheld releases is that you absolutely under no circumstances can let go of this release. Now with an index, you just grip behind the index itself. If you were to open up your palm with this strap around your wrist, your bow, your string, nothing would happen until you push that trigger. Whereas with this, if you clip onto that string, draw back, and for whatever reason open your hands enough for that to pull out of your fingers, that is going towards your riser with this attached to it at whatever speed that string goes towards your riser. And you can do some serious damage to your riser, your arrows, your bow system as a whole. So you got to be careful with stuff like that. Most of these come with a lanyard hole, which I highly recommend using. I pretty much run a lanyard on all my releases. This one doesn't have one on it just for the sake of the video, but I always recommend a lanyard in the interest of safety. Another thing that I've noticed using handheld releases is that if my form is not correct, which we should be assuming that your form is correct for pretty much any shot because that's what we're here to build. However, when my form is not correct with a handheld, I notice it more than I would when I have incorrect form with an index. I think it has something to do with the pivoting nature of an index style release with that anchor point. The difference in anchor angle has less to do with your shot when using an index versus with a handheld like this. That is a fixed post. There is no swiveling, there is nothing like that. It's a fixed bar that has your D-loop attached to it. So if you screw up either when your trigger breaks or while you're at anchor, if it's not the same every single time, I notice it more with these than I do with the indexes. But I almost chalk that up as a good thing because as a training aid, it is teaching me what a bad shot feels like, and then also what it looks like downrange when something goes wrong with one of these handhelds. And to be completely honest with you, there is really no reason to switch away from this if you're happy with the performance. Personally, I got into it just because I was curious about what these were like and sort of what the whole deal with them was. And then I started shooting them, and then I got good at shooting them, and then I kind of fell in love with shooting them over index style releases. For hunting situations, the logistical pros to having a single piece release that I can stick in my pocket while I'm not in need of it versus that which I have to wear on my wrist, that helped me out a lot. Being able to clip it onto a release, or onto a D-loop, pardon me. Although I would recommend a locking release if you're going to clip it on your D-loop and leave it just so you don't knock it out of the tree. But being able to clip it onto my D-loop and just leave it while I sit and wait for deer to come through was great as well. Zero chance of like knocking it on anything metal, on a tree stand or whatever have you, and spooking game from doing that. Huge plus for me personally. So essentially what you're going to have to do is weigh the pros and cons for you personally. I would recommend trying them both, trying out indexes and thumb buttons in different price ranges from different brands. You can go down to a local shop and probably just sample different releases, shoot your bow using them and see how they feel, and then make your decision based on what you enjoy or what you don't enjoy. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for you. That is sort of my journey on what releases I am shooting as a bow hunter in the whitetail woods. If you've got any comments, concerns, suggestions, that's what the comment section is down there for. Feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. Lets me know you like what we're putting out here on Outdoor Tactics. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.